Hey people, Pranks the Man here. This video is about making gaskets. It's a 3-step process that I use. The first step would be making the tooling. The second step would be looking for the material, and the third step would be actually making the gaskets. Now when we come back, I'll have the first step all set up, which will involve making the tooling. Okay, I'm back. I got the parts laid out. This is steel brake line, extra parts just laying around, 3/16 steel brake line, 1/4 inch, 5/16, and then 3/8. How you find the size of the tubing? This is a drill bit size. Just basically put them in the holes. 3/8, 5/16, 1/4 inch, then 3/16. These are the main holes you pretty much use for making gaskets. Anything bigger, you'll have to find other material like a piping conduit, copper pipe for 1/2 inch, 3/8, and so on and so forth. I use these mainly. Every time I make them, I seem to lose them, so it seems like every time I'm making gaskets, I'm making these tools. I use a pipe cutter to cut the pipe. Pipe cutter makes sure that the cut is square. You want it 90 degrees. Make sure it's a flat surface, because this is going to be the cutting edge, and then be using the drill bit to make a chamfer in the tubing to make the cutting edge. And when I come back, I'll do that. Okay, I'm back. To make the cutting edge in the tubing, I use a 1/2 inch drill bit, and you go for the part where you use the pipe cutter to cut the piece of tubing. That makes sure it's a flat surface that you're going to bevel. You're actually making the cutting edge for the gasket material. It's going to be spinning in your hand, so use a pair of vice grips to hold it. Then use a piece of sandpaper to smoothen out the burrs. You don't want it bigger than the size of the tubing. When you're pushing down on it, chamfering it, it's going to want to open it up. It's pretty sharp. Another tool that you'll need would be an X-Acto knife kit. Comes with holders, different types of razors to put in the holders. Go to your craft store like Packatans and buy this for like $5. Okay. Next part's finding the gasket material. Okay, I'm back. Gasket material that you can use is pretty much poster board like. You can actually go to the craft store and buy poster board to make large gaskets, small gaskets. A piece of poster board probably lasts you forever for making gaskets. It's basically the same material that a regular gasket is made out of, which is cardboard. It's a certain kind of cardboard. It's not corrugated. Corrugated cardboard is what boxes are made out of, and it's hollow. You don't want to use any of that for making the gasket. You want a solid piece of cardboard, sort of thick. So when you go looking for gasket material, you look around the house. Perfect gasket material. Everybody's got to eat. You're going to have something like this hanging around. Don't have to buy it. Another choice would be running to the parts store and buying a roll of gasket material. Who's got 20 bucks? I don't. I do have this. Honey buns. Gotta have fuel. Everybody's got to eat, so if you got to eat, you got gasket material. If you look at the material, it's just like poster board. It's not hollow, it's a solid piece of cardboard. How a gasket works is, when it's like this, the gasket material will actually dissolve. It's just regular cardboard. Now when you compress it, gasket material, when you compress it, you're actually smashing the grains to where whatever you're sealing will not penetrate it, because the grains are smaller than what's trying to absorb into it. That's how the gasket works. Oil, gas, has a certain size molecule that when you compress the gasket, you're actually making the grain smaller than the molecule, so it will not penetrate the gasket. That's how a gasket works. A couple examples of what you could use is Little Debbie. Depending on how big of a gasket you need to make, gotta find the box big enough. It's basically packing material for food, for microwave dinner, or there's another choice, old cereal box. This stuff works great. I prefer macaroni and cheese boxes. So I've done it on small engines. I've done it on car engines, truck engines. Certain kind of gasket that you can make. There's certain kind of gaskets you can't make, like cylinder head gaskets. Cylinder head gaskets are multi-layer gaskets with metal, and then you have the gasket material sandwiched in between another layer of metal. Those are too complex to make. That's not what I'm making here. These are gaskets that would seal up, say, a water pump, a fuel pump, a crankcase on a small engine of a Briggs & Stratton, which is what I'll be doing. Intake manifold gasket on a Briggs & Stratton. I've put them on there, and just a regular gasket. I've built the front end of my Jeep once or twice using this method, and it's held together for 1 or 2 years till I had to tear down the motor for other reasons, and the gaskets work perfect. So that's the material you can use, and everybody's got it. Okay, I'm back. This part's going to be about how you actually make the gasket. Be making the gasket for crankcase cover. I got a hole cut out so you could lay it down onto the part. This piece is big enough for the whole part. Make one piece. You don't want to make separate pieces of the gasket. Got a little hole for the gear to fit in there. What you want to do is you want to hold it in place and use your finger to press an outline on the material. And if you notice, I have the brown side on the inside, and the part's still dirty. It's best time to make it when the part's dirty, because the dirt's going to leave an outline on the gasket material. So I'll hold it in place, run my finger along the gasket area, and it's going to leave an imprint. When we come back, I'll show you that. Okay, as you can see, it left an imprint on the gasket material. Now what you want to do is you want to take an ink pen and trace an outline of it, and then take an X-Acto knife and just cut on the outline. Don't worry about the bolt holes. The bolt holes are for the tooling that you made, which is this. I'll be back. Okay, I'm back. I messed up the first gasket. I repurposed the packing for my hand grinder that I just bought. It's actually a thicker material. I like it better for what I'm using it for. This is the crankcase halves that I'm sealing up. Seems like the thicker the cardboard, the easier it is when you push onto it. It's going to leave a better imprint. And if you look into the light, you can see the imprint that I pushed into it. So when I lift that off, it's going to have a deep outline, very noticeable. I'm going to trace it with an ink pen, and then use an X-Acto knife to cut out the gasket, the outline. The bolt holes are going to be for, that's what these are made for the bolt holes. There you go. That's why you leave the part dirty. You can see it better too. Okay, when I come back, that gasket should be cut out, and I'll show you how to punch out the holes. Okay, I'm back. I got the gaskets all cut out. I actually did a couple of them. I did it's the crankcase, the valve covers, and the intake gasket. I'll show you how to punch out the bolt holes. It's kind of hard to use an X-Acto knife to do the bolt holes, which is why these were made, because usually when I'm cutting them out, I have a habit of going too close to the areas where it's sealing and mess it up, or I tear the gasket from pulling on it. So this is about the easiest way to do the bolt holes. Set the camera down and take it from there. I'm sure you can see. Okay, I got my anvil. Works best with an anvil. You could do it on a piece of plywood, but piece of plywood, the cardboard's going to want to cup up and maybe tear the gasket. I like doing it on a metal surface. The carburetor gasket, these are 1/4 holes, so I'll use the 1/4 piece of tubing. Since there's an outline of where the bolt's going, you know where to punch. Just set it on there, center it, and nail it. And it's going to cut through the gasket. Perfect round bolt hole. Take the cardboard out and do the next hole. carburetor gasket. I guess this is the valve cover gasket. 3/16. Go for the center of the imprint, just tap on it. This is the end that you chamfer. It's got the sharp edge on it.
Okay, this is the crankcase gasket. There's a quarter 20. Oops, I'm using a quarter tube.
There you have it. Gasket's all done. Valve cover gasket, intake gasket. I'll probably have to make another gasket for the gas tank mounting of the carburetor. Test fit it. Looks good to me. even the pinholes. The pinholes line up all the bolt holes. That's how you make a gasket. Okay, I'm not done yet. One more thing, which would be the gasket sealant used to put the parts together. I normally would put the parts together dry, but I have a little secret, which is mainly why I'm making this video. I'm sure everybody knows this little part, making your own gaskets out of poster board, but making the tooling, some people might not have known that, using brake line tubing. You can also put the brake tubing into the drill. As long as you drill slow, it'll cut in there. When I was hammering on it, this part I used a lot. You see how it's bent? That's from the hammer. And the cutting part, I'm going to have to resharpen it, just because the hammer smashed it down. This is soft tubing, so maintenance is required. The X-Acto knife kit cost me about $5, like I said, from Packetans. Ink pen, I'll keep with the kit. These pieces of tubing, I'll keep with the kit. The ink pens for drawing around, darkening the lines. And one more thing I want to point out, when you're using an X-Acto knife to cut out the gasket, you want to cut it out on a piece of wood. That way when the knife goes through the cardboard and you're cutting through and the knife is dragging on the wood, you want to cut it on wood, because if you cut it on metal, you're just going to dull the blade. To sharpen the blade, I can get to that. Fine tooth file, and I'll set the camera down and show you how to do that real quick. Take the file, just like a chef sharpening his knife. Do the other side. Oop, wrong way. Probably have to pull it out. Well, anyways, you could use a fine tooth file. Go against the blade, not with the blade. This'll sharpen it. That'll get the razor sharpness back. So when I come back, I'll show you the different kind of gasket sealants. Gasket sealants. Bye. Okay, I'm back. This part's going to be what you use to, in addition to the gasket sealant. You can use Permatex, RTV, stuff like that. Basically stuff you already know, but what I like using is something simple, and that's it. Paint. You basically paint the gasket, let the paint flash. That's when the solvents in the paint evaporate, and then you put the part together. It's the best thing. In the automotive industry, people use that for gasket sealing, for Loctite, for thread locking. Real cheap, inexpensive way of doing things. I've used this to bolt together race engines. It works. I've used it, I've tested it, took the engine apart, and oh my god, you had to use a crowbar to pull the parts apart. Works real good on head gaskets.
You don't use it to seal a combustion chamber. You use it for the water pathways and the oil pathways. Put a fine spray on it, let the paint flash, and then you put the heads on. Like I said, I've tested it. I've had to take the engines apart after doing it. Oh my god, I regretted it because it tore the hell out of the gaskets, and I had to scrape the hell out of the block just to get the paint off. It works. Special way I do it, I'm only painting one side of the gasket. That's going to be the part where it seals onto the engine. I'm doing the crankcase gasket. I painted this side. This side's going to be facing the block, and then the other side is going to be for the cover. I'm going to use grease on that. That way, if I ever have to pull the engine apart, the cover will come off and the gasket will stay glued to the block. That way, you would be able to reuse the gasket. I'll prove that. I'm putting the engine together right now. I'm not going to show you how it works on the crankcase cover. I'm going to do it on the valve cover also, so I'll take that off tomorrow and I'll show you how it works and how the grease works when you grease the other side to where the gasket will stay stuck to the engine block. Until then.
Okay, I'm back. It's next day. The gasket's pretty much set. The paint, I'm sure, is dried and sticking, so change of plans. I was going to remove the valve cover, but dummy me forgot to bend over the tabs on the piston rod bolts, so evidently I got to pull apart the case again. So I'll set the camera down, pull the case apart, and we'll take a look at the gaskets. Okay, gasket stayed in place. It's glued. And I'll be able to reuse it. Now, if I would have sealed it up with sealant on both sides, I would have tore the hell out of that gasket, and I'd be making another gasket right now. So, the plan worked. Now, when I painted the side that faces the block, I allowed the paint to dry. It was still sticky though. And then I took a finger with bearing grease and I wiped this surface down. That's how I kept the gasket from sticking to this. I did that to this gasket here. I'll do that to the carburetor gasket. Now the head gasket, I did something different. Usually when you pull the heads off of these, you don't want the gasket to stick to any part of it, so I put oil on both sides of the gasket. That will help keep it from sticking to the block and to the head. Okay, that's the reason why I do my gaskets the way I do them. You seal one end and you make the other end to where it doesn't stick to the part. Comes in handy. I forgot to bend the tabs over on the piston rod for the bolts. Like I said, if I didn't do that, I'd be making a gasket right now. More aggravation. Do the job once, do it right. You don't have to do it again. So, this is Prankster Man. Make a comment. Any questions? Rate the video. Subscribe. Bye.